I asked her, when was a time that you had a behavior that was being influenced by an internal experience that no one else understood where that behavior was coming from? And she shared about getting involved with the potential sex trafficking situation. And one of the things she said is that I just wanted to be loved. And she said obsessively. So Grace is seeking this from this internal place, finds this character online who's giving her this. Obviously, he's manipulating her. Come to find out that he's not what he says he is. And then from that point, you all have an experience where you're like, what the hell? Let's start there.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Grace and Love podcast. I'm your host, Grace, and today I am joined by Brian Post, founder and president, and I will be introducing my parents, Doug and Lesley Lidge. They are adopted parents of 6 adopted children, 7 altogether, and this is their story. Guys, how are you feeling today?
Good. I'm Doug, by the way.
I'm Lesley.
So glad you guys could join us. Me and Brian are going to ask a bunch of questions and really bring out the story so that we can all be part of it.
And I think what's important is just to frame our time today is that this podcast is for adoptive parents and helping them to understand themselves better so they can understand their children better so they can just have better relationships, which is what we try to teach and preach all the time anyway. So your being here is a great privilege, and we appreciate you taking the time, but it also gives adoptive parents an opportunity to just hear directly from someone who's gone through what they're probably going through and give them some hope. And so I would like to start with, let's start with Grace. I had the privilege of interviewing Grace, and one of the stories she shared, I asked her, when was a time that you had a behavior that was being influenced by an internal experience that no one else understood where that behavior was coming from? And she shared about being a teenager and the internet thing, getting involved with the potential sex trafficking situation, getting called to the office. And one of the things she said is that I just wanted to be loved. And she said obsessively loved. And so what that reminded me of is that a lot of times I will talk to parents about claiming their children because adopted children need to feel claimed. And I heard when she said obsessive, I felt that compulsion within myself as an adopted child. So Grace is seeking this from this internal place, finds this character online who's giving her this. Obviously, he's manipulating her. Come to find out that he's not what he says he is. And then from that point, you all have an experience where you're like, what the hell? Let's start there. What were you feeling as parents in that moment?
Terrified. When I think of what you started with about the intensity, at that point we had several children. She's a teenager, so there's a lot of chaos happening. And so the idea of giving each child intense amounts of attention, that's not available in different seasons. And so here she's getting the experience of someone intensely obsessed with her for a reason. Commerce. And but she doesn't know that. And she just feels this experience. And, I know the bad guys out there. And so knowing that someone's targeting her and someone, could take her. And it just made me feel incredibly vulnerable, really scared for her, super protective. And it was really hard just to walk through that. It was like, and then, struggles with it. Have I not done my job? How did she get in this position? Things like that.
How about for you, Lesley?
Terrified and out of control, like panicky, like I can't control this. This was happening at school. We had control over the home computers, but this was happening at school. And she was of an age now where she was trying, having more agency and starting to be more sneaky. And I felt panicky, like I've lost control and something terrible is going to happen to my kid, and it's going to be my responsibility because I can't manage this thing. Yeah, panicky. I mean, to me, that was like, okay, I need more help here. I can't do this. It was like, if this happens on my watch, the amount of condemnation I would feel, unbearable.
Right.
And so the decision was to send her to residential treatment.
Yeah.
Well, there's something in between that, which was that we actually had a little intervention at the school. Policemen came, explained how they'll have adult women come and say, "Oh, let's go to lunch," and things like that. And then all of a sudden, they're moved to a different car, and they within a couple hours they're at the border, and we never see them again. That kind of thing could happen. And so we're explaining this to her, and at this point of development, her response was, "Well, I've never tried it, so maybe it would be fun." And the realizing that we couldn't do it at that time, we couldn't provide the structure to keep her safe. That was it was a really hard decision to put her in treatment, have her move to a different state. That was really hard. But the overriding thing was keeping her safe during this extremely vulnerable part.
So that brings up a couple different things. To me, this is one of those extreme situations where parents are backs against the wall, don't know what to do. They're living in this moment of fear, terror. Now, what was this? How long ago? How many years was this?
Wow.
10 years ago.
10 years ago.
10 years. So 10 years ago. So now we're looking at it because the outcome is that Grace ends up experiencing the exact opposite of what she was hoping to experience. So this is interesting as I'm talking to her during her story. So instead of feeling obsessively loved and claimed, she gets sent away.
Right.
So it's like a paradox.
Right.
And then however many years later, gets involved with a guy who's almost on the manipulation continuum of a trafficker. So it, in some regards, ends up happening anyway, just in a different context from what we feared. But if you were to rewind from today, 10 years ago, with your lens right now, what, if anything, would you or could you have done differently?
Yeah, for me, I do, kind of an algorithm, and physical safety is paramount over anything else. And that was a completely known that we were going to have her have a rejection injury. That was part of the decision, and it was horrible. But she was such a setup for physical danger, and people are getting in touch with her. So and then the progression, she did progress in treatment. And if you think about it, the guy that she got in contact with after treatment was manipulative, but he wasn't going to harm her. He wasn't going to put her into prostitution. So it was better than that. And then, the process we had to do, which was very difficult, was to always be engaged with her during the treatment. We had a lot of visits all the way to Utah, a lot of the connections, all that stuff. So she didn't get the sense that she's abandoned. But still, there's an injury that we had to go through and walk through. So I guess I can't figure out how the things I've learned would be able to change the actual physical danger part. So that's the part that if I had the ability to, take her to a ranch and cut off all her, social media for a few years, but that wasn't available. So.
Yeah, I'm just curious. I'm just curious. What about for you, Leslie?
I'm I'm baffled. I mean, like, one of my big regrets with Grace is Grace was my first adopted child, and so different than me, different than anything I understood.
Mhm.
And I didn't have any insight. It all scared me. Everything's, the learning challenges, everything that I lean on for my feelings of safety and success were not, that wasn't there. Okay. Like okay. So it was like, how am I going to keep this kid safe? It all evoked panic in me. And I didn't have anything telling me like what I have now, that it's like a lot of internal and external reassurance that when my kids are doing them, it's like, oh yeah, this is part of it. And now I have this retrospective view. I can see, oh, I know how this plays out. This is going to be okay. I didn't know that. All I knew was, I don't know how to do this. I don't know I don't know how to do this. How do I make this person learn? How do I make this person safe? How do I make this person? I had no tools. And so I guess in retrospect, if I would have had the tools and I would have started way earlier and I would have seen her and I would have loved her where she was at and I would have gotten all the support we need. Like when I was trying to homeschool her and I couldn't teach her to read, that was all about me at the time because of where I was. It was like, because I was a teacher,
Took it
right?
personally.
Oh yeah, I was a failure. And I studied all these different teaching, reading. I used to teach kids to read in Spanish. I could not teach this child to read. And the oldest son, he just learned to read. Okay, I didn't teach him to read. So now I'm trying everything. Finally, I take her to a reading specialist. And through her, I found out, oh, it's Grace's brain. Okay, it's not me. And I was eroding our relationship by trying to make it, get it in there. So, yeah.
Yeah, that may have been a part of the issue, is that less communication, because she was a project to fix and get her back on the normal path, not knowing she has her own path.
Yeah.
And getting interested in that. We didn't have those tools at all.
Exactly.
She describes it as driving a round
peg into a square hole. Yeah, trying, and all my effort was
Just
in
banging.
driving the peg. I had no clue that no, that's not the job here.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And you said there's many things that the two of you are saying in right now. One of them, you said, I was a failure. And how many times do we know now the experience that adoptive parents have because they don't understand the trauma piece of the adopted child?
Right.
They're looking through the lens of their own personal story. And this is, Grace interviewed me this morning, and I shared about my sister and my parents being parentified and my sister being emotionally stunted. So they're hyper responsible. She's hypo responsible. Right. And it was a disaster because they were trying to bang the round peg into the square hole, or however you say it. And it just sets up a recipe for disaster, all under the auspices of loving your child.
Exactly.
Right?
Well, that's the thing.
Righteousness.
The self-righteousness is about, you adopt children because you're a good person.
Yeah.
And you're going to be good. And it's going to be this wonderful story, which it turns out to be. But there's this middle part of the story. Mm-hmm. And part of it is the disillusioning, which sounds bad. But I like to say, well, it's getting rid of illusions. Mm-hmm. And the illusion is this kind of how, she's going to learn this way and we're going to do this. And then finding out you feel like a failure because you're not doing it the right way. To find out there's another way, you have to go through that failure feeling and possible shame and guilt feelings. And then the big issue that both of us agreed about when we were talking about this podcast is always asking for help. We were always in parenting classes. Some of them contradicted each other, and we could find some good in this and some good in that, and then find out it's a failure in this area. Oh, that didn't work, and all this kind of flexibility and getting help. The one thing, I don't know if you remember this, I'm going to give you a compliment. You ready? Okay. Which is the one thing I kept saying about all the parenting classes. Every single parenting class you're in, they're not talking about the psychology of the parent, where they came from. and what they're bringing to the parent-child relationship. It was always about fixing the child and making sure, well, this behavior, you do this. And so it was just a, huge relief to come here. And, we come into the initial seminars and, okay, all you parents, work on your issues and let's lay down and walk through this. And it was like, exactly. And helping us to, do the disillusioning, getting rid of our illusions, then able to accurately see what the child needs and what we need. So it was really,
and what the
powerful.
child's behavior is triggering in me.
And what they're saying something.
Yeah.
It's not just misbehavior. It's
Every behavior is a communication. We learned that here.
So I want to jump to a different little focus for a moment. You all have 6 adopted children?
Correct.
When is there too many adopted children in one home?
After the first one.
And because
Well,
I
at
want to
least
say,
I'm not the problem.
I want to say, because the county and the state will keep putting kids in homes that are completely overwhelmed. At what point?
Oh, they stopped with us after 3.
They wouldn't have.
When
If
we
you would
had
have been
6
insistent, they would have put more.
Right.
Well, they did. We had 6 total when the full-blooded biological brother, our youngest, became available. And when they heard we had 6 total, there was some new law. This was new that no, they weren't going to place with us.
No, even before that, Natalie had to be through. They were saying no more babies. Remember that?
Well, that was just the count.
And so then we switched counties, by just happenstance. And then so the last 2 were, God putting them in ours. And I think because we asked for resources and because of leave, that it was doable. There's a lot of chaos, but I can't conceive of not doing this now.
Sure.
Although I must admit, every so often I'll think of 3 or 4 of my kids, and it can be any 3 or 4, and I think there's 3 more. What? And it just kind of blows my mind every so often.
Well, and I want to say to that, in retrospect, it's like no one was like my friends told me, Lesley, you get it. You're going to have 4 teenagers. Which, of course, I wasn't thinking, right?
That's right.
And I didn't know what teenagers were. So, okay. I don't remember being one. And, okay. So no one was overseeing and saying, I mean, I kept thinking because I'm a stay-at-home mom, I'm capable, I have great support, we're good. I can do this. And the yearning was not abating, right? I mean, I love to tell this story, though, that in the first 3 to 6 months after getting a new baby, I would go through this period where I would think, what was I thinking? Because it would be so hellish, right? So dysregulated. The whole family's askew. And then about 6 months, it would calm down and I would start the paperwork again for the next one, okay? And so how much is too much? I don't know, but no one's looking for it, so you better.
No, that's the other thing is that, programs like LEAF that are trying to take care of the family, no one does that. County systems don't do that.
Right.
You're on your own unless you get the help or ask for it. So that thing, you're part of a system and they need families to get these kids out. So you have to take care of yourself or get people to help you with it.
I think that they also try to place siblings within same homes,
Right.
Yeah.
Which is kind of the drive between all the bio brothers and their eldest brother that was placed differently. And due to the age gaps, he was in already, middle school age before the next one was even born. And I think it's not really the question of, well, why, how many kids is too many kids from the county or, from private, but it's the question of how many children do you feel you can love? How many children do you have the room in your heart for? That's kind of the other side of that question is you guys kept saying yes because there was a yearning there, and you did have the support from Dad, and you are a strong, capable woman, and there is chaos there, but that's part of the story.
Mm-hmm.
So it's the kind of the journey that the universe wanted you to go on. because it taught you something. What's one thing that this adoption journey has taught you?
One of my favorite quotes, I'm a quoteaholic, can quit anytime, but it's Helen Keller. She said, "Life is a bold adventure, or it's nothing." And I've always gone by that, and that was part of the motivation here. And damn, she was right. It's just been an adventure, which means it's scary, and you don't know what's going to happen, and there's no guarantee of success, and totally worth it.
Totally worth it.
So that part of trusting God with everything and just walking through the mess and asking for help, that muscle had to grow hugely, because past any concept that I would even have about, what you could get from kids, the level of connecting to their vulnerability connects to my vulnerability, nothing like it. So.
What about you, Mom?
Of all that. And like during all the troughs, the periods when I felt like this is a disaster, right? How's this going to turn out well, right? All the panicky moments, the feeling like I know that God did not put me in this position to cause more trauma to my children, those moments, right? And in spite of those, and I get to be with moms that are in those troughs, and it's like, it was all worth it. It was all worth it because so much change has happened in our marriage, in our individual growth, and now these relationships with these kids. It's like, I wouldn't trade it for anything. Wouldn't trade it for anything. But there were many times in the journey when I would have jumped ship, as I wanted to jump ship.
Right. And, people who, soldiers who've been in combat will meet together for decades because they're the closest they ever got during that intense vulnerability and fear and all that stuff. And that's what happened to you and I. we went through that. And it, no one else was there, and here we are. And it's just caused just a growth of meaning and of
purpose.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Aw, I love this. Love.
Well, it's actually a very full circle experience, because I told Grace when I first came to you guys' living room, she wasn't there.
Right.
And so we got started working, you guys worked, and here she is showing up, having impact in the homes of other families and making it possible to reach other families via this podcast. It was her saying, "I want to do a podcast," and me saying, I like the definitiveness that she said that. I want to do a podcast. She's gonna do a podcast.
Okay.
We're gonna make this happen. And here we are. So, we all have our journey. And I think one of the things, if we could just grow more courageous as human beings, is having conversations without judgment. Let's just talk about our journeys without judgment. The shame and the guilt is natural, because those are natural feelings, but we don't have to judge them, because we can learn from those, and we can realize that maybe there was something you didn't do or couldn't do or wouldn't do, but it all works out. It all works out. And so how do we just explore it and look at it and brainstorm around it and then just keep on moving?
I totally love that, because so much of judgment is trying to narrow life, and because you're afraid, and the idea of there may be something there, even in what's clearly wrong, the wrong direction, and you and them learn something that you would not have learned any other way.
Yeah.
And also, I'm a history fan, and anyone creating something or doing something, they're immediately judged, and that's not right. There was a New York Times petition of the 100 people on it, physicists signing, saying that Einstein was wrong in his theory of relativity, and his comment was, "Well, if I'm wrong, it only takes one person. Why 100?" And just that always happens, and so not being a part of that confidence of judgment and going, getting curious, like you said.
Mm-hmm.
So that triggers. So I have these questions that keep popping in my head, and my brain's old. My hippocampus isn't as firm as it used to be.
You get a transplant. Yeah.
What is the process as parents that allows you to keep wanting to learn, to be willing to challenge yourself, to be willing to take responsibility, to say, I'm not perfect. I don't have this all figured out. Like, what's that internal messaging, and where does that come from? Because I want to contrast that against the parents who show up wanting to do the work, wanting the help, needing the help, but revert back to what they've always done based on what someone else has always told them, which it always ends up blaming their kids or blaming everyone else for why we're not getting better, and being victimized is one of my favorite words, being victims instead of taking responsibility.
Exactly.
What's the internal process for you all as parents?
I have the answer.
You can back up fill in my answer. The answer is desperation. The gift of desperation, G-O-D. Get it? Okay.
Wow.
So that was what happened for me. I had the gift of desperation because I could not manage and control. I had all these kids at home. I was homeschooling them. We had all these animals. I'm going to do this great thing. I'm going to take these broken babies. I'm going to give them this beautiful life, and I'm going to give them a perfect life, and it's going to be beautiful.
You had a lot of self-confidence.
A lot of tools and a lot of good ideas. Okay. Right. And the gift of, and I was in recovery in a 12-step program. Okay. So the whole message of recovery is it's your gift of desperation is the transformative juice, right? And so I had that in my head all over the place. And then I'm living it. And it's not it's the gift of desperation that's coming from, I cannot manage and control this situation. And so that set me into a teachable mode, made me humble and made me teachable. And then it took years to work through all the self-righteousness, all the, I know better, all the,
Well, the confidence, we know how life's supposed to go. And then Grace shows up. And these other 5 kids show up, and Walker, to our oldest, they all seem to be gifts from God to teach us that we don't know what we're talking about. Mm-hmm. And either they, and then there's that choice. Either we are, no, we're right and they're wrong, which is a default setting, or we collapse. I guess we don't know anything. Or we go, we don't know how to do this. We still have to do it. And so we're going to ask for help, ask for God that, even if we screw up, we'll learn something and it'll be, work for good, and do that adventure. And that's the only one that worked.
And we pay attention to the little victories, the fruits,
right?
Yeah, the things to celebrate. Start paying attention to them. And this is where we're at now. It feels like the fruit is like abounding, right? It was a long time, very dry, very scary, right? No signs of how's this going to be. But now we're in a place where it's like it's self-affirming. It's like, okay, this is the way. Walk in it.
Right.
It's fantastic. There's a lot to unpack in what you all say, and I feel like sometimes my brain just starts bursting with hearing statements because they're so important, because I want to bring them down to a way to say to parents, listen, you said it took years of humbling yourself.
Or being humble.
Against my will.
You were not part of it.
And who wants to participate in
Exactly.
That's like, ugh.
Yeah.
It's just so intense.
Yeah.
But it's the only way. One of the things I like saying is that there's only 2 groups of people: broken, desperate people needing help, and the second group doesn't think they are. And they're sicker than the first. Yeah. And so to find that out and then know that is not a symptom, but just reality. And it's okay. And we can't tell ourselves it's okay, because it doesn't feel okay to us, but getting around people that understand that and are further down that road and can tell us it's okay. It's okay. I mean, there were times.
Everything belongs.
There were a couple times when, I'm calling you and I'm in a panic. It's just wrong. And it's okay.
Take a deep breath.
Yeah.
Can you sit down right now, Lesley? Okay, now can you take a deep breath?
No, we need specific advice. What's going to happen with that? And just, it's okay. And it was. You knew that it was okay and we didn't. And that's what we need sometimes in the middle of that adventure.
Yeah.
And I think what's also important about that is that parents start out on the journey of seeking help and seeking support at 5. And then they go into mental health, and it's oftentimes a reinforcement of how we were raised traditionally, but just put under the auspices of counseling. And so then the child turns 6 and then 7 and then 8. And then the next counselor, the behavior's getting worse. And then it's 9 and 10. And now we're at the psychiatrist with the medication and the new diagnosis. And the input you continue to get year after year after year is the same input. You're not, so you start out as a parent really hungry because you're feeling desperate. But then the input that you're getting is actually not giving you anything that's different than what you grew up experiencing. Mm-hmm. It's like I always say that in the first grade, we either put our nose in the corner or you got put on the dunce chair. Well, 50 years later, it's just called timeout. It hasn't changed.
Yeah, I get, to redeem a little bit of mental health services.
Yes.
There has been a decrease in the meaning aspects of relationships and of these diagnoses for third-party payers and things like that, and medications. But and that has been used to kind of say this symptom shouldn't be. We should have less of that, then the person would be okay. Meanwhile, at the same time, there are lots of really good therapists and psychiatrists who understand that's just a mode to deal with, the structure of mental health services, but there's something much more meaningful happening. Mm-hmm. And so we've had people and counselors who said, no, what's the meaning of this symptom? What's happening? As opposed to the, at times in certain systems, the standard of, well, how many angry episodes in the past month? Mm-hmm. Oh, we decreased it from 10 to 6. Good. That's not what you're talking about, and doesn't produce any growth or intimacy. But there are still people who do that, who understand that, and there are times when there's a place for medications, but for only symptom reduction and no curiosity, that's when it becomes a problem.
Yeah. Well, I want to put the layperson spin on that, which is that when you're going through all those motions that you talked about, going from this doctor to that doctor, and that's what I did. I got to all the experts. Nobody is tending to, wow, your nervous system is really jacked up. Wow, your kid's nervous system is really jacked up. No one's so nothing good can come ultimately until we bring down mom and dad's nervous system. Right. Out of the red zone. And I'm watching that in my home right now with my 11-year-old, just watching him. And I saw it in my 16-year-old when it happened to her. And now I'm watching him just slowly come down because it's safer. And we're learning all the ways to communicate this safety. And a lot of it comes from the fact that we're in a calmer place by the fruit of this work.
I want to backtrack a long ways. In Grace's interview, she said that her bio mom, all the exposure, drug exposure and alcohol, then fought to get her back, and you fought to keep her. And so
she only fought legally. She would not do anything the courts asked to. She never got a drug test. She never did any of those things.
Rarely showed
and the hell of it was the fact that the judge actually constitutionally could not break open a biological family, could not break it. Mm-hmm. After this case, she actually left the court to do other things because she couldn't do it. Mm-hmm. So we were stuck in that system. Mm-hmm. But she only fought in terms of legally, not in terms of anything.
Legal maneuver she was learning in jail.
Right.
Not any actual action steps she was taking, like getting sober. Mm-hmm.
So I'm interested from the standpoint of the adoptive parents with the adopted child who has a perspective that their bio parent fought for them, adopted mom fought harder, adopted mom won, she was strong. What's that final outcome? Because in the field of adoption, there are a lot of angry adult adoptees that think they were stolen from their biological parent. And I mean, they are pissed. Good, bad, or indifferent.
And I think
so. It's just an interesting, when she made the statement, and obviously has gratitude, and you're the representation for her of who she wants to be. But it just struck me as, oh, that's interesting, because that could go a completely different way. Even though we know bio mom didn't actually do the stuff, the perception of the adopted child is my bio mom, especially if you have a challenging, stressful upbringing as the adopted child, and you never really feel accepted or loved, which would have been my sister, who always talked about her bio parent that created its own ongoing negative feedback loop of guilt and shame and overwhelm for the whole system. So it's just an interesting thing.
It's interesting. The movie Prior to Us Getting to Adoption that we saw was Second Best with William Hurt, and he adopts a young teenager, and he idealizes his bio father as an adventurer. It turns out he's an IV drug addict and then he finally finds it out, gets disillusioned. But he idealized that, and I think that's our approach has never been to demonize the bio parents, to go, no, they're a part of it. We are hugely grateful because they could have easily gotten an abortion. And so, I mean, we're just, super grateful to them always. And then, as they get appropriate age, we reach out, is this something you want to do, and reach out, and we're totally open to that. And that's part of the story. That's not an enemy. It's part of the story.
So you didn't feel threatened?
No.
You didn't feel threatened? Did you ever feel threatened by the biological mother?
No, not in this case, because mom was in jail going to prison. So she had to, she's tried to bring in other relatives, and that's who we were really fighting against. And all we had to do is let them know what the medical needs of this baby were, and she totally backed down because she was not in a position to take care.
It's such an important emotional place to not feel threatened by the biological parents.
Right.
We have felt like the three boys we have, they had meth addict parents that have stayed married and had 3 kids. They've stayed together this whole time. And I remember before I didn't understand that much about meth addicts, we were afraid that they would find us, that they were going to come and hunt and steal our babies. And we did have open contact with the maternal grandma. And there was we had a lot of fear around it. Yeah. And now, I ran into her and I felt like I don't fear her anymore because she can't pull all that together in the state that she's in. And I feel like Doug's so much gratitude to her. And she was expressing gratitude to me. That was amazing.
And I think there's a difference between fearing physically, like they're going to come steal your kids, versus feeling insecure. Like, so my adoptive mother is still very insecure about my biological mother, even though I never knew my biological mother growing up. And as an adult, my adoptive mother still feels insecure, even though she's my mom. Like, she's my ride or die. But that little statements still pop in there that reflect that insecurity. I never had to grow up with that, but at very early ages, it's interesting because I'm also interested in how we don't allow our adopted children to grieve because of our insecurities.
Right. Well, they're not your parents. We're your parents. All that kind of stuff.
Yes.
They'll slip and they'll go, my real parents.
Right.
I could feel that.
But
I actually learned in this program about letting them grieve. There is, like, I remember Grace, because she was my oldest adopted kid. Do you remember? She said to me, was it about my real parent she was expressing, it sounded to me like sort of victimized, feeling sorry for herself that she was adopted. Right. And I gave her the scripted lines of, no, you should be grateful. Look how adoption blessed you, adoption blessed us. It's so great. And then here I learned, like, no, there's grief there. I don't care. See, I thought because I got my kids young that we skipped all that, right? Wrong.
And because it's the idea that there's these idealized parents might be out there, and that we are fearing them because they would be better than us or viewed as better than us. But I think that's the thing we were talking about before, the desperation and our plans falling apart, that we're grateful for anything. That's the level of desperation. So it kind of dismantled that idea that our children's attitude toward us makes us okay. And to go, no, I mean, they get to have their experience, and some of it has to do with us and some of it doesn't, and that's okay. And so it didn't become, my okayness is how much my kids think I'm a good dad. It's great when they do, and sometimes I am, but sometimes I'm not.
Yeah.
And that's okay. And so that took kind of the onus off of, I need to be worshipped as this great adoptive father. And we did something really neat, and we got the benefits of it.
And the kids are going through their own little ebb and flow of their identity and who we are. And and so letting that all belong.
Right, exactly.
Hijacking our episode.
I think it's awesome. So now we get to do another one just where I grill them about the whole story.
Yeah. Any questions you want to ask?
That's a good question. That's a good question about questions. Man. Wow, you guys have really divin. Pause.
Dived deep.
Doven. That's a hard one. Jumped.
You guys really jumped into a lot of really kind of the methodology behind, and the way of thinking. And changing that. One thing we talk about in Leaf is helping your child grieve the loss of their bio parent. I think that was something you were going to touch on, or possibly touch on, and encouraging that, and not, and a lot of parents that can probably get lost in this. No, wait, you should want to be with me. Why would you want to be with them? Mm-hmm. I saved you. Right. Instead of moving from that, you turn it into,
Remember you and I on the bed and me telling you?
Which one? Go back.
Well, both your therapist and your mom. And just walking through that. That was intense.
So when I was in high school, I was doing a lot of the behavioral stuff, right, that we talked about. And it touched on klepto. It touched on this whole identity. Who is Grace, right? And I really, really struggled with that self-worth. Who am I? I don't want to be a shell of my bio mom. I don't want to be my bio mom creating me. So when I went to treatment, one of the biggest blessings that I will attest to for the parents that do send their kids to treatment is I, by the grace of God, got handed a therapist that worked immensely well with me. This one program had a way of getting the right therapist with the right kid, and tons of different success stories coming from the spot. But the one that she really helped me with was the klepto stuff. And we worked on it, and we understood that it's this fear and want to be loved and cherished, owned, or claimed, right? And so if I saw something shiny or something that somebody else had that I thought I wanted to be while I was experimenting, I would just take it. Crazy enough, I was taking stuff that I was sleeping in the same girls' bedrooms, and I would wear their shirt to school. That's how distorted my thinking was, thinking that that was okay. So through that therapy, I was able to repent, forgive myself, return, or, make up the money to return those items and things I stole. It was hard because it's embarrassing. We had our old neighbor that would babysit us when we were children. And then I started babysitting her kids when she had kids. And I stole a couple $100s worth of her really nice clothing. And she had no idea. And she still didn't have any idea. But when on one of my visits home, it was my job to return the clothing and the amount of money that it would have costed for the clothes I could not find anymore. And my mom helped me email or text her, said, hey, so-and-so, my daughter wants to come see you. She has something to give you. And I knew that she had no idea what I was doing. I had to walk up to her door with a bag of her things and say, this is yours. I know this was wrong. you know, and go through that. And oh my God, that was so humbling. So this was the one therapist, sorry, Dad, the one therapist that actually has a trackable change in my life. And I am one of the only kids at that program that knows what really happened to her. And I was on a home visit, and my dad and mom call me into their room. It's Christmas vacation, and they call me and they say Jennifer died. And they were going to tell us a Bosch story about what happened, so that because kids in treatment shouldn't know that it was an OD situation. So they said she crashed. And I told the school, no, we need to know what really happened. Our daughter's going to ask, kind of something like that. So they told me what really happened, and I kind of just sat there. They told me I'm standing in front of them, and I just dropped to my knees.
I remember that. Yeah.
And I just can't say anything. I'm just sitting there. I'm in shock, stressed, short-term memory, and I don't know what I'm feeling. And so Christmas has never been the same. And neither has Over the Rainbow, that song. Those are two things, but that was a big one. Yeah.
Yeah, we walked through that a little bit.
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah, we've been through some stuff, man.
Mm-hmm.
And also the intensity of, you were starting to reach out and maybe get a connection with your biological mother.
Right.
And
she was helping with that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd sent her an email. I was paving the way. Grace and I were going to go together to meet with her, and then she died. And it was drug related. And I could tell from her email that she wasn't well, and I told that to Grace because at some point she seemed like she was in recovery, and she was, her Facebook posts were really positive and grateful. I thought, oh, okay. But then this email was a different flavor, and then, how much longer? It wasn't that many months longer.
It was a Christmas later. This both happened around Christmas. And Christmas has never been the same. But, yeah. It was two different flavors, both drug OD related. One was accidental, misunderstood the amount of pain relief to take. And the other was probably more intentional or something like that.
Cumulative, yeah.
Yeah. So they both have a different flavor. They both were, from what we talked about earlier, important in some capacity, right? I'm not going to totally disacknowledge like my mom. But, I was angry at her still, right? And then at Jennifer, I was distraught and sad and building something that was going to gateway to Bio Mom.
Oh, that's right.
So I was angry at Bio Mom when she died, but I was distraught and sad about Jennifer, but kind of hopefully going to change that. And then when I heard Bio Mom died, turned off everything, every interest. I stopped talking to Lauren for a long time, Bio sister, for a long time too. I don't know if we did that. There was a little bit of back and forth at first because we needed to see what we were doing with Mom. But I know that all I know now is that there's ashes and we have yet to spread them. So that's where we are with that story.
What words of wisdom can you share with adoptive parents listening, going through it?
I have words.
Yeah. Like just a word that they can hang on to. Mom's in the car, dad's on the way home, they're listening. What can you give them?
Well, it's not succinct, but what comes to mind is, first of all, the most important thing for me has turned out to be, contrary to my upbringing and my self-care. Taking care of myself and my soul is the most important thing I can do for my family. And that's been a learning journey. And then taking care of my marriage is right up there, okay? Because there is not going to be a stable, harmonious teamwork situation here for these kids if this is not in a healthy state. And then asking, like Doug said earlier, asking for help. asking for help and being willing. And if I don't have the willingness, praying for willingness to let something new in, because for me, it was a complete upheaval of how I saw the world. That was what was required for me to make this change. And, upheaval of how you see the world is painful and strenuous and confusing. And so it doesn't feel good. So having, like what another thing Doug said, having support around you so that when it's really feeling scary and terrible, you know that this is the way. Sure. You're okay. It's going to be okay. It's going to be okay. And what would you add to that? Getting help.
So, that, some people want to join the military, and some people join the Coast Guard, the Army, Navy, Air Force. Few people want to join the Marines. And if you're going to adopt children, you're gotten in line for the Marines. Mm. And what's the line? It's the hardest job you'll ever love. Mm. And it breaks your heart, and it doesn't go right. And it gets to a level of desperation. And when you get there, to know, that's the point of what's the technical greatest inflection. That's when the growth happens. That's when your life changes. And it feels like it's changing in the wrong direction, but it actually isn't. If you get the help and the redirection and the encouragement to walk through that, it changes everything. And you can learn about unconditional love. The joke I have, which is that my goal is to teach my wife unconditional love by not meeting any of the conditions. But that's what these kids do. They don't meet the conditions. And if you learn how to love them, you learn how to love yourself and everybody. And it just changes the universe. So it's totally worth it. It's hellish and heavenly-ish at the same time.
That's fantastic. It's beautiful. I adore and love both of you. Fantastic people.
Mutual.
If you were to choose who you love more, just curious.
Of all my parents, the same.
Oh my gosh, my parents say that to me. Well, thank you guys so much for coming on the podcast. Brian, thank you for co-hosting this episode with me. I am so blessed to have you guys in my life.
Grace said, my parents are coming for an episode. And I said, well, I'm going to join. She said, oh, that'd be great because you're not answering their calls anymore. I said, no. I always answer the Lidge's calls.
That's great.
You do.
That's good.
And for that, we have been very grateful.
That's right. That's right.
Thank you guys so much for listening to the Grace and Love podcast. Again, I'm your host, Grace, joined by Brian and my parents on today's episode. If you guys would like to find more episodes like this, please stay tuned for upcoming episodes. Please like and subscribe to our channel to find more information like this. Till next time, bye!